Chad Daybell on trial for the murder of the two children of Lori Vallow and his ex-wife. It's going to be a very, very compelling case to watch to see where all of this ends up going. Joining me to discuss, Shavaun Scott, psychotherapist and author. Obviously, we've been watching this for a long time. We've already seen the Lori Vallow case. Now we're up to Chad. We're talking about two people who shared very, very similar beliefs, very apocalyptic, bizarre beliefs. How do you think those aspects will play out in this trial?
Well, certainly in Lori's case, the diagnosis of a delusional disorder, along with her multi-layered personality disorder pre-existing, was very relevant to her.
Hmm.
And this will be interesting to see if anything about Chad's mental state comes out at the trial. Is it going to be alleged that he was delusional as Lori was delusional, and Lori still continues to be delusional? So I'm curious about that. Will we find out that Chad really did believe his own BS? Is he delusional, or was this all just more of a game about his ego and having a cult of followers?
Is it possible for someone like Chad to come out of those delusional states? I mean, once you get there and you're believing that you and Lori were married in a past life, the kids are, or multiple past lives, the kids are zombies. I mean, just way out there thinking. Do folks like this ever come out of that once you've crossed that threshold? Let's just start there. Do they ever come out of it?
It's a great question because I think we can look at this kind of delusional thinking on a continuum.
Hmm.
There are lots of people with religious beliefs that an atheist might look at and say, "You're all believing in this invisible, magic father in the sky. This is all a delusion. None of this can be proven by science." Okay, well, at what point do we say, but believing that your kids have turned into zombies, there's this huge gray area with religious belief, and when does it turn into delusion? I think you have to again look at it case by case. It's hard to tease apart because we do want to be respectful of everybody's religions, but I
Hmm.
think when it's in the context of the culture, it's normal in the culture. So these folks came out of the Mormon culture.
Hmm.
It's not considered crazy within the context of that culture. But when you get into a belief that is even considered bizarre in the culture and it's causing negative side effects or negative consequences are coming from it, that's when you have to say, okay, let's look at the extreme of this belief, the harm that it's causing, and does this fit the criteria for delusion? And we certainly have seen that with Lori. We may see that with Chad, or we may see that he has dialed it down a lot
Hmm.
and is in essence going the way of Alex Jones. Well, I'm just an entertainer here, and these were stories I told,
Hmm.
as we would have said, Alex Jones was clearly delusional, but he didn't really believe it,
No,
as
no.
when he got called out on it, it was like, well, this was just for entertainment, folks.
Yeah.
So we
You
don't really know where Chad is going to go with it at this point. I have a friend who's an elderly retired physician, very intelligent lady. Her husband passed away, and now every time she sees a butterfly, she says it's her husband's spirit.
Mhm.
You know, and I think if we sat down and had a
Yeah.
serious conversation, do you really mean this? I think she could say no, but it's a nice thing. I believe it makes me feel
Sure.
better. So
And delusions like that can be helpful for someone to heal. It's
exactly.
not gonna hurt
Yeah.
anything.
It doesn't hurt
Yeah,
anything,
in
it's
that
not
sort of
impacting her
context.
day,
Yeah.
yeah, it's fine, and so that's that gray area. It's a fascinating thing to explore. When is belief really helping people, and when is belief turning dangerous,
Yeah.
and what's the line there?
Well, exactly. I mean, if she was, to sit there and if like a child or something swatted the butterfly away and it died and she then pulled a gun out and killed the person who swatted the
Exactly,
butterfly,
exactly,
that's dangerous.
exactly.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
That's the line we have
Yeah.
to analyze in trying to tease this stuff apart. Yeah.
And with so much of this belief connected to a religion, connected to God, and people, I mean, they attach to that in scary ways sometimes that get to quite extreme delusions. You had mentioned earlier, we need to respect everybody's religion. Do we need to stop doing that? Do we need to stop respecting everyone's religion? And I guess, at what point do you say, this one's respectable, this one's not, because
I know.
that I think that's the weird line. I mean, but when it gets into the dangerous territory, I think
Right.
respect needs to go away. But is that something we need to re-examine a little bit, because it goes to such extremes, and everything's okay, and every religion is,
Yeah.
it's a. They're not all
They're
the
not.
same. They're all
No.
very different. Some are
Right.
pretty harmless. Some teeter on that brink of, if one of your people has a mental disorder or something, they could go bad pretty quick, and that would be most, in my opinion, of the Mormons, of where
Yes.
it's like, okay, for the most part, your organized temple stuff, you're all pretty harmless, whatever. But then you push it a little bit further, and you get to this territory, and that's why we see such a uh, crazy, unbalanced amount of people coming out of that organization
Yes.
doing these crimes. I mean, it's
Yes.
completely unbalanced for the amount of people that are actually members of that church, compared to the amount that are involved in serious, like, homicides and things of that nature.
I agree completely, and this is a frequent topic of conversation at my dinner
Yeah.
table, the whole issue of faith. I was raised in a Pentecostal church as a kid,
Hmm.
and I remember being 12 or 13 and really believing all this stuff and believing that people were demon possessed and that
Yeah.
God healed everyone by faith if you just prayed. And by the time I was 16, I was looking at the holes here. This isn't all adding up. It doesn't work. People die. People had kids that they prayed for that had a disease. They didn't get them treatment, the right medical treatment. That people died. I was able to, as a thinking person, by the time I was 18, I was done with all of that, so that's my own personal history with it. But when we try to say, but we want to respect everyone's faith, you look at a country like Afghanistan and the interpretation of Islam that's
Hmm.
going on over there. I'm sorry, that's not a faith I
No.
can respect. And of course, just with Christianity, there are all kinds of ways of interpreting and acting out your faith, and some can be very benign and some not so much. But I think humans are wired to have belief. I think this is just in our DNA because you find it across everywhere there are humans, you will find beliefs in supernatural things. So it's quite a challenge to determine as a culture, as a society, how do we balance people's need to have a belief system with being aware and wise about the potential dangers that can go when things go too far, when people get delusional, and when you have people who really have dark motives, just putting the belief on as a
Hmm.
way to justify their desire to have a cult and have power.
Yeah. I mean, and if you just look at it logistically and how it all works, it's very much, it starts in childhood. It's
Yeah.
indoctrination, and I mean, I grew up in a Lutheran church, and it was like, and that's what is preached. That's like literally in the Bible. Bring the kids and teach the
Yeah.
kids young, and
Yeah.
okay. Is that if everybody didn't like quite go into that world of learning about these things till they could fully kind of grasp what they're understanding and talking about, I don't think they'd have as many members. I think there'd be a lot
Right.
of people like, yeah, I don't know about this. But if you get indoctrinated into it early, there's that there's a feeling to it. There's a nostalgia
Mhm.
to it. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of people almost stick with that just because of those factors, of the
Mhm.
nostalgia, of the warm and fuzzy, and I don't want to let mom and dad down. I don't want to let
Mhm.
whoever else down. Is that why we have, or what enables some of these more extreme beliefs? Because, well, this is what they did. It's what I'm going to do. I mean, it can happen in a fairly, non-controversial setting, like a Lutheran church, but it can also happen in, extremist settings like this.
Right, right. And I think, in a healthy developing young person, as they get older, they start to analyze the belief system that they were given as kids, and they can choose, okay, this is what really fits for me. This goes with my own morals and ethics and the way I look at the world. And then this other stuff, not so much. And
Mhm.
so, I think when you see healthy people, they may not stay in the faith and they may say, well, there were some good things I took away from it, but
Hmm.
I'm not into all that. But you do have people that swallow it whole.
Hmm.
And it does seem in some of these aberrant families, like the Vallow, situation with Lori, um, they took it, everything they were raised in, and then they put it on steroids and became even more obsessed and strange and out there with it. So it's something that I think, yeah, it would do people good to sit down and ponder and think about it and assess, really, what do I want to have my kids grow up with here? Hopefully we want them to be able to think for themselves and assess these things.
That's ultimately the goal. Unfortunately, I think a lot of times that part gets looked over because this is more important than that in some minds, and it can go, very haywire, very, very quick.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Tony Brueski. If you like the podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, and press that bell so you don't miss any of our updates on the cases we're following for you right here at the Hidden Killers podcast from True Crime Today. And thanks